There has got to be a reason why happiness among young adults has declined over the past 30 years, with lifetime milestones that were once easier to achieve now seeming more and more out of reach for people in my age group. Just turned 29, by the way. With this then leading people my age to experiencing midlife crises before they turn 30. The water is rising and everyone seems to be looking for a life preserver. And I tell you what, there's a guy who's making them and selling them at a 500% markup. And he is the man behind the death of the American dream via 1,000 paper cuts. There's a lot going on right now. You've probably heard of all of it. We're gonna be talking about it. Specifically, why everybody hates Larry Fink. Institutional investors in 2025 now control up to 25% of single-family rental markets in major cities. And this number goes up as these institutional investors purchase up to 1/3 of homes that enter the market in some regions. Electricity bills have surged by 26% or more since 2021 and are up 5.5% since only last year. Health insurers are now denying claims en masse using AI and algorithms with error rates of up to 90%, which the insurer ultimately reverses after an appeal. Just deny everybody. And then when someone's actually dying and they say, "Can you please help?" Say, "Well, I guess, as long as you don't shoot our CEO anymore or whatever." On top of all this, Americans are financing groceries through buy now, pay later services at record rates. I cannot believe that these are real things. These are not conspiracy theories, by the way. These are all documented things, and all of the things that led to this are documented corporate strategy that has been a part of our free enterprise for the last 50 years. United Healthcare, a company you've probably heard of, is known for its highest denial rate, which is tied, by the way, with another health insurer. This denial rate is nearly twice the industry average, and in 2024, the CEO of United Healthcare earned $10.2 million before he was assassinated. BlackRock holds 11.9% of an entity called American Homes for Rent, with a 4 in the name. This company buys homes and then rents them out to people so you can live somewhere. You know, if you don't have enough money to own a home, because it's expensive to own a home. Thanks to the good old folks down at Homes for Rent, or whatever the name of it was, you can pay for a property that you'll never own. They are the controlling influence for over 59,000 homes. This information came from 2023, and that number is still rising. Private equity firms, or P firms, as I call them, have accumulated trillions of dollars in assets. By the way, these are private equity firms. All of this while wages have stagnated for decades. We have graphs to show you. In fact, private equity assets under management were worth $600 billion in the year 2000, but grew 1,600% to over 9.7 trillion by 24. So we've covered a few topics. What links housing, healthcare, energy, and even groceries together? Comment down below. Just kidding. I don't have time to read your stupid comments. What links these things is that each one has been transformed from a necessity that can be afforded to most in some form or another into now an asset class. All of these things are ways to make money without actually just taking money and then giving a product, or building a house and then just you own the house. So there's a bit of a systematic extraction of wealth from necessities to make more money. The necessities being housing, utilities, healthcare, and food. All these things have created a generation where home ownership at age 30 is dropping and has dropped drastically, as homes have become nearly twice as expensive for millennials as they were for baby boomers in their 30s. And this is a complete and total fact. My parents built their first house for $90,000 in 2001. Things have changed so drastically, but of course, baby boomers will say, "Well, you just have to work, youngin'." Hey man, it isn't that easy. Chum Lee from Pawn Stars, it is that easy. You do have to work, obviously, but it's like there are things at play. There are actually genuine evil things at play that are extracting every cent out of us. And you can't be that ignorant to not see it, TBH. 37% of Americans right now in this year cannot afford a $400 emergency expense. You've probably heard of that stat before or something along the lines of it. What we're seeing is part reality, part perception, part deception, and there's facts that are then fueling conspiracy, and the conspiracy is masking the facts and the perception and the deception. It is very complicated, and it all makes perfect sense when you learn about it. So how much of this is real? And how much of this is a coordination from corporations to raise costs and parallel greed? And why hasn't there been government policy to stop this? What percentage of it is a conspiracy theory? And how likely am I to die within the next 7.5 months? Pretty likely. And also, is this unique to America or is this happening worldwide? We'll answer all those questions, probably. First, we have to go way back. How did we get to this point? Let us start with the 2008 financial crisis and housing market crash that took the legs right out from underneath America. During this crisis, millions of families lost their homes. Over 2.3 million homes had at least one foreclosure filing, accounting for 1.8% of all housing units compared to 700,000 in 2006, which represented 0.6% of all housing units. That is an insane increase in a very short amount of time. And this was because adjustable rate mortgages saw payment increases as the cracks in the system became visible before it broke, and the delinquency rate on single-family residential mortgages skyrocketed from 3.1% in Q4 2007 to 11.48 by Q1 in 2010. That is unbelievable as well. Equity and ownership in these homes was wiped out as the values of the homes plummeted by as much as 20% between December 2006 and December 2009, and much more in areas that were hit the hardest, such as Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix saw a drop of up to 60% in value during the 2008 housing crisis. So you have so many families that had poured their savings into property that suddenly saw their net worths erased, and not because they couldn't pay their mortgages, but rather because the system just tumbled from underneath them. With their net worths being erased, the future that they'd planned to pass on to their children, that was erased as well. Then there was mass unemployment, which only exacerbated the issues further. The Great Recession, as it is known as now, saw unemployment peak at 10% in October 2009 before beginning to stabilize and trend back down. The toll on Americans, both financial and psychological, was immense. You probably can remember, if you're my age, driving around with your parents being like, hey, can we go get food? And your parents are like, I haven't worked in 3 months. We don't have any money. So no. And many watching this happen in real time lost trust in real time of the system, feeling that it was completely rigged as they watched the banks that had quite literally caused the collapse receive massive bailouts while ordinary families were left to fend from themselves. This is now referred to as the Great Bailout of 2008 and 2009, and Congress set aside $700 billion to buy bad assets or toxic assets from financial institutions in the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act, the ESA of 2009. And meanwhile, in 2012, borrowers who lost their homes due to foreclosure by these banks received approximately $2,000 each in a direct payout as a result of the national mortgage settlement. So, hey man, sorry you lost your home. Here's $2,000. That's so unbelievable. So as a result of the crash, there is a massive flood of homes hitting the market resulting from foreclosures. Institutional investors were then able to scoop them up in bulk, buying them at incredibly cheap prices and turn them into rentals. So we see a ton of people lose all their equity, and then institutional investors swoop in, control that equity from now on because things have recovered, then preventing people from ever actually accessing that equity ever again. That is now a business's bottom line. And all this is completely connected with today's housing crisis. The 2008 financial crisis created an unprecedented opportunity for these institutional investors to transform American housing into a corporate asset class. What began as an emergency stabilization evolved into a permanent market capture. And Larry Fink, this guy who you've seen, is a man who was perfectly positioned to take full advantage of the suffering of millions of Americans in the form of buying their toxic assets. So we have to go way back to Harry Banks lore, okay guys, because it's very complicated. He sort of was behind the housing crash in a way. He was kind of behind the whole thing. He kind of orchestrated the whole crash. Kind of. It's probably not true to say that out loud, but Seems like it, a little bit. He's the guy who made the thing that led to the thing, which then caused the thing. So anyways, Lawrence, aka Larry Fink, began his climb to the top of Wall Street at First Boston, an investment bank in New York. He worked there from 1976 to 1988, going under the pseudonym Larry the Lobster. Larry the Lobster was a managing director at this bank. Then Larry started trading these things called mortgage-backed securities or mortgage-backed bonds, and only 2 years into doing this, he was heading the bond trading department. So mortgage-backed securities. Larry is credited with pioneering this movement, this form of asset at First Boston and the MBS market, and then further pioneering the mortgage-backed securities market in general later on, which is something that will be incredibly important. So remember that. Larry Fink created mortgage-backed securities. It's more complicated than that, for sure, but it doesn't need to be. It is that simple as well. Larry also served as the co-head of First Boston's taxable fixed income division, which oversaw all government, mortgage, and corporate securities. This guy was in control of a lot of very important stuff. He was a superstar at First Boston. He'd added about $1 billion to the company's bottom line and believed he was on track to become the CEO of the firm before one terrible mistake that derailed his promising trajectory. You see, the market, it moved in ways that Larry didn't understand. He went from earning the company $130 million in one quarter, which is a feat he didn't fully comprehend, to losing the company $100 million in the next. How did Larry do this? Well, he took an enormous gamble that ultimately failed when interest rates unexpectedly fell in 1986. You might be like, well, that's good though, right? You're telling me that Larry failed when interest rates dropped and helped the average person afford lending on various things like homes? Yeah, guys, that's actually what I'm saying. When interest rates unexpectedly fell, benefiting 99.9% of every human alive, it was bad for Larry Fink. 2 years later, in 1988, Larry and First Boston would go their separate ways. But the same year, he founded BlackRock, with risk management as one of its core principles. You know, because of how risky it is when interest rates drop. Now, BlackRock began as a fund management shop within Blackstone after Fink was given $5 million in seed money from Stephen Schwartzman and Peter Peterson, Blackstone's co-founders. This was in a move to create the subsidiary. This move echoed the Blackstone brand and signaled that BlackRock was also its own thing. Now, it was a bit of a rocky union. BlackRock began to thrive immediately and never required additional funding. It grew to manage $23 billion in assets in a short period of time. But Blackstone and BlackRock did disagree over business growth. It was a bit of a rocky point in their relationship. They would later separate in 1994 after Schwartzman sold BlackRock to PNC for $240 million, which is a deal that Schwartzman still regrets to this very day. Schwartzman? I love saying that name. So that's 1994. 2 years before this, the U.S. Marshals would unlawfully siege a man in a cabin on Ruby Ridge and murder that man's child and wife. And then, 8 years after that, on October 1st, 1999, PNC would spin off BlackRock, making it publicly tradable while still maintaining majority shareholder status over the company. At BlackRock's initial public offering, or IPO, which is an acronym you've probably seen if you've done anything financial, PNC maintained ownership of 70% of the company's stock, while BlackRock employees owned 16% and 14% would be publicly available for trade. By the end of 1999, BlackRock had grown the value of its managed assets to $165 billion, and Larry the Lobster was doing very well at the helm of his own ship now. So, they're holding assets. How does a company that holds assets actually making money? Well, guys, it circles back to the old mortgage-backed securities that we mentioned earlier. See, while Mr. Lobster had pioneered them at First Boston, it was at BlackRock that he perfected these pesky little things. Mortgage-backed securities were initially conceptualized as a win-win innovation, but they quickly deviated from their original purpose and were immediately corrupted for corporate profit, as is everything that's ever existed, ever, and will continue to exist until the end of time, until we rise up. Just kidding. Essentially, a mortgage-backed security allows banks to sell the home loans they're holding into a pool that investors can then buy into. And as long as the loans are being paid by people, the pool's investors make money. Now, you might be saying, well, I don't really want my house, the loan on my home, the lien against what I own and live it. Yeah, I live in this four-cornered thing with my family. I don't really want someone gambling with my money in the stock market. I don't really want someone gambling with my note. Hey, guess what, dumbass? You don't have a choice. And you can thank Larry Fink for that. The financial theory of the mortgage-backed security is pretty high level, though. It's awesome. It seems really cool if you're a bank. If you're a human bank. In theory, the mortgage-backed securities are freeing up capital that banks can then use to approve more loans, to then create more mortgage-backed securities, and therefore expand home ownership for people who may otherwise not qualify for a home loan. It's sharing the risk, okay? It's the idea of it. And this little invention made mortgages more accessible to low and moderate income households, and also decreased the risk for banks because investors are eager to get their slice of the home payment pie, and the risk, once again, is spread across the board as investors absorb the fallout for non-payments. So, the stock market goes up and down. People pay their mortgages and don't pay their mortgages. It's like, makes a lot of sense from the very high macro level, but when you think about it, it's like, oh, this guy can't pay his mortgage because, he died or something like that. That's bad. It seems less fun that way, when you think about the money and the people making money off of it. So you win if, I don't know. Let me know down below. Eventually, different forms of mortgage-backed securities emerged. The two most crucial kinds to know are the agency mortgage-backed security and the non-agency mortgage-backed security. Agency MBs are less risky because they are issued by government-sponsored agencies, but they also yield lower returns than non-agency MBs. Non-agency MBs are high-risk and high-reward investments. They're not government-backed at all, and they are issued entirely by private companies. And there is currently an ongoing debate over whether participating in the trading of MBs is a predatory practice. And you could probably figure out why with your prefrontal cortex, as it turns the mortgages that people rely on for shelter, which is a basic human need, into something that can be gambled on by people who are, I would say, evil. Just saying. To put it very simply, the MBs allow investment firms and hedge funds to place bets on your ability to make house payments. And this is where the exploitation of the system becomes extremely apparent. When banks realized that they could approve a loan and immediately sell it into a securities pool, things got out of hand very, very quickly, as loans to people who had no hope of repaying them, aka high-risk loans, became rampant. Not to mention the people giving out these loans also receive a commission. So there's only incentive to get more loans, to then therefore make more money. The big intangible is whether or not these pesky human beings who are paying them can actually pay them or not. These high-risk loans are referred to as subprime mortgages, and they are objectively a form of predatory lending. The entire agency MB's model was designed to invest in loans where borrowers had been thoroughly vetted and were statistically more likely to repay their loans. There's some thought that goes into this institutional way to make money. Even if some borrowers defaulted on their loans, the agency guaranteed that the investor would still be paid because overall, it is an insured, backed, well kept up thing. In contrast, non-agency MBs were the Wild West. You've got people with incentives to give people loans regardless of whether or not they can pay them. It's just an incentive and an incentive and an incentive, and then, there's the bubble right there. With non-agency MBs, solid loans were packaged alongside the shaky subprime ones, and borrowers who were responsible and creditworthy were put at risk when the risky loans began to default, as the whole security was then tainted. And as time went on, more and more banks began to pack their securities with bad loans and ratings, which were supposed to gauge the level of risk for an investment, and this all became meaningless because they were feeding it horrible information because they were just giving loans to everybody.
You smell that? What is that?
What?
What's that smell?
The cologne?
No.
Opportunity.
No. Money.
Oh, okay.
I smell money.
Okay.
The entire system was poised to collapse. And once again, homeowners who actually are paying the mortgages have no control over whether or not the mortgages they're paying are packaged into an agency MBs or a non-agency MBs, other than outside of just choosing which institution they use for their loan, like going to the bank and saying, I want my local First Bank to, finance my home. But then they can still sell that shit without your permission, okay? So there is no control. There was no control. There still isn't. The people who own the loan for my previous house, I could sue them, okay? I could sue them. I have a massive video plan where I'm going to destroy them and hopefully get sent some kind of cease and desist or defamation or slanderous lawsuit. I've been feeling very vengeful lately. I know where the guy lives, the guy who owns the company. He's a piece of shit. I took pictures of his house. Anyways, there's not a lot of transparency, and banks are obviously not going to advertise to you that they're selling your solid loan into a security with a bunch of high-risk subprime ones that they've also approved and are somehow equal to yours. So many people were treated like chips at a casino and were not told. It's a very technical and boring, detail-oriented topic, which is why in the movie The Big Short, they got Margot Robbie to describe it while in a bubble bath to keep people interested, of course. And I'm not in a bubble bath, but by God, I hope you're interested still.
Here's Margot Robbie in a bubble bath to explain.
Basically, Louis Rainieri's mortgage bonds were amazingly profitable for the big banks. They made billions and billions on their 2% fee they got for selling each of these bonds.
So, risk management, okay? Remember, BlackRock was built around the core principle of risk management. And while it did participate in the trading of MBs with a founder who pioneered the concept, it primarily traded in low-risk agency MBs at this point. So Larry had helped build this new asset type, but he wasn't going whole hog dick on the table with it, all right? This guy, as a lobster, pretty reserved and conservative. He played it pretty safe, and when the market inevitably collapsed after these bonds became worthless and the market went belly up, he was there to pick up the pieces he'd helped fill the board with. That is the capture of toxic assets. So the United States government couldn't just sit by while the economy was in shambles, and they began attempting to stem the bleeding. So we already mentioned the great bailout of 08 and 09, but while the government was setting aside funds to bail out banks that were collapsing as their own doing, they also turned to BlackRock for help, specifically Larry Fink. And with BlackRock's core principle of managing risk, and with the founder, Larry Fink, a founder and expert in the mortgage-backed security market, which is the whole thing that led to all this stuff, Larry's company was selected by the Federal Reserve to manage $130 billion in toxic mortgage assets from the crisis. And BlackRock was just one of 9 investment managers that the Treasury chose. It feels to me a very dumb person, somewhat like creating a fire, then being the firefighter who's called in when others use that fire to burn a house down. Interesting. The market became oversaturated with foreclosed homes. We mentioned the number earlier. That was 2.3 million homes that had foreclosure filings, and there was a vacuum there to be filled. And these institutional investment firms, you know, obviously took the opportunity, because what else would they do? Bail out the people? No! Of course not! Thanks, Obama. While BlackRock is managing $130 billion in toxic assets, in 2012, Blackstone formed Innovation Homes, which is a single-family home rental company that purchased 30,000 homes out of foreclosure for $10 billion, with spending reaching as high as $100 million per week at its peak, as they acquired properties to relist for rent. Because obviously a corporation isn't going to move into a house. This number would only grow over time. And in 2017, Jonathan Gray, the global head of real estate at Blackstone, told CNBC, "We own about 100,000 either multifamily homes or single-family homes for rent. And across the board, across the country, we're seeing strength in that area." Bah! That was my impression of him. In May 2024, the Government Accountability Office released a report detailing the stark rise in institutional investor ownership of American homes. For 2011, no single investor owned more than 1,000 homes. But by 2015, between 170,000 and 300,000 homes were owned by these companies, and this number would reach nearly 500,000 by 2023, 2022, 2024. Also, I know a lot of people are like, why is rich YouTuber guy, extremely wealthy, successful, handsome YouTuber guy talking about these money problems and all this stuff? I run multiple businesses, okay? And I'm pissed off about all this shit all the time because it's all I can think about. Because my business that employs almost 30 people across the board, which I try to treat very well and pay them as well as I physically possibly can. There is not a month that has gone by where I've made money since 2021. I promise. I've literally hemorrhaged money since 2021 because I'm trying to run a business the right way. This type of stuff, it doesn't just affect the average person, it also affects small businesses. There are so many small businesses that just, it's hard to think of what a small business is, but there is more of a difference between a small business that's earning $15 million a year and the average corporation than a small business that's earning $15 million a year and a regular person making $70,000 a year or $55,000 a year, whatever the average household income for a family in a not so wealthy state. Basically, my point is small businesses and average people are in the same boat. There is no such thing as free enterprise. This thing that exists that's everybody over is actually everybody over. Everybody who doesn't sell their soul or play by some kind of draconian evil corporate rule book. There's a club and we're not in it. So anyways, the trend of corporations sucking up homes instead of allowing people to live in them and own them has a greater impact on some areas than others. Jeff Merkley, in support of the End Hedge Fund Control of America Homes Act, outlined how in 2021 alone, nearly 43% of homes for sale in Atlanta and nearly 39% of homes in Phoenix were bought up by large hedge fund investor groups. So it's very clear that this focus of sucking things away from the average American is concentrated devastatingly in specific markets. Here's a breakdown of the estimated percentage in just a couple. And you can see that it's like a minority still, but a large percentage of homes are just not owned by humans. What? 25% of Atlanta is owned by corporate America? That's unbelievable. And then what other percent is owned by old heads who think Airbnb is a good idea? It's unbelievable. It's not sustainable. Everything will come crashing down around us very soon. I don't think that that's actually true. I think we'll be on life support for the next 50 years. Nothing will come crashing down. Go to sour.gg and buy some candy. We release new flavors. It seems less important whenever I'm doing a video. I don't even do ads really anymore in my videos because I'm like, God, candy doesn't seem that cool whenever you're talking about this shit. But we release new flavors every single month and it's made by a small business. If you want to support a small business, then feel free. But if you don't, I completely understand. Your money you should be saving it in all honesty and spending it on things that really add value to your life, long-term value. Save money and go on a trip with your family. Go out in wilderness and witness things that are important. Don't buy candy. Anyways, guys, we're talking about this ugly Larry Fink right now. He looks like a turtle. Let's get back to the video. Sorry. Blackstone's kind of like the king, but there are many other companies growing alongside Blackstone. For example, Invitation Home, but Blackstone formed Invitation Homes, and there's also American Homes for Rent, which Blackstone's got a holding in. There's also Tricon Residential, which is dominating the space in certain regions. But wait a second, guys. Blackstone actually sold its stake in Invitation Homes over time, with the last portion of its holdings being sold in 2019, but then invested in Tricon Residential in 2020? How about you can name something with a more evil name? Tricon Residential? Are you shitting me? That's like some Dr. Evil shit. Tricon Residential holdings reach $65 billion. What are our holdings? What are we investing in? Homes. You have no idea how many people want homes. And they're willing to pay, all their money that they have to be able to live in them. It's insane to get a roof over their head. It's a really good way to make a lot of money. Also, according to the NASDAQ, BlackRock is now one of Invitation Homes' top 3 holders, with over 60 million shares valued at nearly $2 billion, which is chump change, by the way, for their total assets under management. But the New York Times calls this a $60 billion housing grab by Wall Street and outlines that the hundreds of thousands of homes falling into the hands of these giant companies are putting the American dream even further out of reach. What are you gonna do? Cry about it? Yeah, honestly, it's worth crying about, dude. It's actually worth it. It's so fucked up and it's so unfair, and there's literally nothing at all that anybody can do. I actually started to cry there. That was really weird. You guys ever do that? So is there a conspiracy here? I'm not exactly sure. I'm starting to think there is, dude. BlackRock's founder, Larry, by the way, I don't condone violence in any way. That was 110% a joke. Is there a conspiracy here? BlackRock's founder, Larry Fink, was a key player in the creation of one of the significant investment assets that led to the 2008 financial crisis, and was then a primary beneficiary of the aftermath, but it is a portrayal that does mischaracterize things a little bit. It would kind of be like blaming Oppenheimer for his Manhattan Project work for the dropping of the bombs, which was done, I guess, by Truman on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's like, you know, he's kind of like the guy, but he didn't really clean up the mess. He didn't clean up the dust. It's fucked up. We should not have done that, dude. We should not have done that shit. If you look at history, people say, look at history, because history repeats itself endlessly. It really does. It literally does. And people say time's a flat circle. First time I heard somebody say that, I wanted to punch them in their face, because like, that's dumb and it doesn't make any sense. But no, it is. It is. It is. If you look at history and you look at various groups involved in society throughout history, the same things happen over and over and over and over and over again. And I feel like the internet and the access to information might be the only way that we break free of this cycle. This might be our Khaleesi. This might be our Daenerys Targaryen moment to break the wheel. I don't know though. I don't have any idea. All I know is I just want to be on the right side of history. I want to be good. I want to make people around me feel good. I think that's why I've been put on this earth, is to feel good. It just make people happy and talk and laugh and watch people smile and then watch them cry right after when they realize I'm heavily invested in institutional investment assets, specifically non-agency mortgage-backed securities, and they realize that I actually own their home and they don't actually own it. I can tell them to get out whenever I want, and I'm a practicer of bird law. I practice bird law. Go to the Gump Club, gump.club, to see uncensored videos on the Oompaville channel. So yeah, it could be a big mischaracterization. It could be intellectually dishonest to say that BlackRock is evil and Larry Fink is buying up all the homes. But it could also just be honest to just say like, man, he doesn't need to do all that. How much money do you really need? How much power and control do you actually need? When was the last time you said hello to your mom, your parents, your family, you know, your children's? When was the last time you said hello to them? Is that what you think about? Or do you think about money? Do you just think about money all the time? Because that's weird, right? People like you throughout history, if you look at history, people like you have been killed a lot, all right, in the streets. People like you have been strewn about, all right? Body parts, individual body parts taken to each corner, right, of the country. Okay, guys? Maybe bleep some of that, I'm not sure. So it could be a bit of mischaracterization or a bit of intellectual dishonesty, but it's definitely not mischaracterization to say that this guy benefited massively off the untold suffering of millions of people and continues to this very day. Not to mention you can't even quantify the amount of suffering that all of this is going to lead to by preventing people from living in homes. So this guy's a piece of shit regardless. So anyways, what's actually genuinely shady without having to think about mischaracterization or any of that is the fact that BlackRock publicly denies any involvement in this. They have an entire page on their website dedicated to denying this, saying that they're setting the record straight, with the following words being written. It seems like BlackRock has been the subject of speculation, misperception, and even mistaken identity in media reports and on social media regarding our role in the U.S. housing market. We want to make it perfectly clear, BlackRock is not buying individual houses in America, but we are heavily investing in other entities. No, they didn't say that. That's true, though. It's like that thing that I do not freebase cocaine, but sometimes I might. Want to talk about mischaracterization and total intellectual dishonesty? That's a genius example right there, guys. They try to gaslight their readers into thinking they're confused. You have to dig to find any genuine information. They are purchasing SEO to make Google not show the truth. It's wild. It's very f***ed up. And I think it'd be really tragic if we sent them a lot of emails asking them to provide us with the truth, and maybe called their office and sent letters to them to them to their various locations. I think it'd be really tragic. I don't think we should do that, guys. I think it'd be really annoying for them if we called them a lot. People forget that that's a thing, that you can just like call people. You just call a number a lot, and it's not illegal to call a public number. Just like, hey, I just want to know, I'm thinking about getting into institutional investing, and I want to become a trillionaire. So I feel like the first place I probably should start is to, figure out what the lowest hanging fruit is. I would love to prevent single mothers from being able to ever afford a home. So, because that's like, they're weak. They have kids to take care of. They can't really defend themselves. So, maybe leave them that message. They also went on to say this. A number of other large asset managers and private equity firms are very active today in purchasing single-family residences. BlackRock is sometimes confused with them because the names are similar and it's about rocks and minerals. As a fiduciary asset manager, we invest and manage capital on behalf of our clients in a vast array of public and private U.S. real estate markets, but buying individual homes is not one of them. So they share what they actually do. And that is to provide capital for mortgages to help American families buy homes and provide capital for new housing construction, which does include some purpose-built for rent housing developments with a focus on single-family rental housing. But they say nothing about buying pre-existing single-family homes to list for rent, because that's precisely what they're trying to deny doing, which is what they're doing. And no matter how much money they spend on Google SEO and press, I guess, they cannot change the truth. They cannot change it. They can't stop the word from spreading. They can't stop that. For both of these points, they specifically cite their investments in mortgage securities and housing development programs as the vehicles that facilitate this. If they can cite their investments in their evidence that they aren't, then I think we should be able to cite their investments as evidence that they are. Okay, guys, we mentioned that Larry thinks BlackRock is one of the top shareholders of Invitation Homes, but that's not all. BlackRock is also one of the 2 largest shareholders of American Homes for Rent, alongside Vanguard, which is another very reputable brand. They're heavily invested, with their 42.8 million shares being valued at $1.5 billion, and that's after selling nearly 800,000 shares. If you visit the American Homes for Rent website, you can search for available real estate in specific regions, and I searched for Texas for this video, and what do you know, guys? Single-family homes after single-family homes pop up in Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. So they're not in the business of buying single-family homes per se, but they are heavily invested in the business of buying single-family homes, which, in my opinion, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, dude. So shut the up, you cronies. You cronies. We clicked on a listing in San Antonio, and right there, the description on the website, it says, this property is professionally managed by AMH, American Homes for Rent, number 4 Rent, a leading single-family rental company. I looked at the listing on Zillow, where it stated the home was built in 2006, which is 6 years before AMH was founded in 2012, conveniently the same year that Blackstone formed Invitation Homes. So yeah, pretty epic stuff, I have to say. The earliest history of the property is related to Coldwell Banker's price changes and listing removal before AM4H purchased the property to list it for rent. Notably, Coldwell Banker's parent company is Anywhere Real Estate, which, by the way, guys, is majority owned by BlackRock. There's no escaping it. It's a web. It's a web. You can't escape them. If you want to make money, if you want to have your company make money and be successful, you have to let BlackRock own some of it. Okay? It's crazy that these people do this. It's insane. It's unbelievable how unfair it is. You want to dude? You want to go to the headquarters? Just kidding. Doesn't make money do that. Cut all that out. Cut all that. I've had offers for people to buy my candy company from companies. Okay, guys, really big companies. Guess what? Guess what Daddy does? Daddy looks up the company and he looks at who owns the company, and then he says, "No, thank you. I want to make money someday, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to sit at a table with these people and pretend that they're anything like me and that I want their money, and I'll just do whatever." Okay, guys, I'd rather have everything go belly up. Don't tell my employees that because they might lose their jobs. But what else am I going to do? I'd rather be able to sleep at night. I'd rather be able to sleep at night than do this bullshit. Too much capitalism. Gotta say, not to sound like a socialist commie or whatever, guys. There's too much capitalism going on right now. All right, and by the way, free enterprise, too much capitalism doesn't mean there's too many capitalists. It means there's not enough. All right, there isn't enough people who are able to embark into free enterprise and actually do the things that make knives, sell dick knives for fun, and be able to make a living wage by doing the thing that they love. That's not communism, that's capitalism, okay? And too much capitalism is not enough capitalists. We need more, not these things that are out there, this cosmic horror that exists in Wall Street. So anyways, that's the first thing that I looked at, and I looked at another, which made me feel insane. And like Charlie in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia on the hunt for Pepe Silva.
Pepe Sylvia, this name keeps coming up over and over again. Every day, Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me. Pepe Sylvia, Pepe Sylvia. I look in the mail, well, this whole box is Pepe Sylvia!
Pulled up another listing in San Antonio, and guess what? We compared the listing on AMH to the listing on Zillow, and this one was built in 2002 and came into the hands of AMH in 2015, with its earliest property history events being from 2012. However, they were from Crowned Eagle Realty. I wanted to see if Crowned Eagle Realty also has ties to BlackRock, so I went looking for their leadership team, and on their About Us on their website, the first person to show up was a man named Dan, a real estate agent who's worked with government contracts, the VA, bank foreclosures, asset managers, the Department of Justice, and investment properties. I thought, hey man, with a resume like this guy should be running this place. Turns out, after some digging on LinkedIn, he's a founder of Crowned Eagle, and under the description for his role, it says, "We are contracting with a very large hedge fund group helping them purchase properties in Texas, and we also work with some bulk REO groups on a wholesale level." We're falling down a rabbit hole very rapidly now, because while BlackRock isn't solely a hedge fund, it works with hedge funds and has a whole website page about how they work with hedge funds and claim to manage over $76 billion of hedge fund assets. Hedge funds, by the way, deserve their own video. You've probably heard of mutual funds. Hedge funds are like the non-agency mortgage-backed securities to the agency mortgage-backed securities, which would be a mutual fund. It's like a bunch of people pulling their money together and figuring out how to be as evil as possible to make as much from it as possible. It's unbelievable that it's allowed. Now, do I know for a fact that BlackRock is working with a hedge fund that collaborated with Crowned Eagle to purchase the property for American Homes for Rent? Absolutely not. Of course I don't. But it's astounding for BlackRock to claim that they're not involved in this transformation of the American housing landscape, given that they're a majority holder of AMH. It's a blatant lie. It's bold-faced, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they're trying to spend their money to keep this going for as long as possible before the bubble pops, whatever that bubble might be. So their blatant lying makes any other crazy connection and assumption seem possible to me when they're so heavily invested in anything and everything, and specifically in making it seem like they're not. Why do they care so much about, is it because people are mad that they don't want to be seen as investing in single family homes, even though they objectively are? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what is the goal? I mean, the goal is obvious, but like, do you want people to trust you though? Because if the goal is to be trusted, then you're failing. You're failing, and you couldn't fail worse. It seems like they believe there are enough degrees of separation between them and the frontline action of stealing homes from, pregnant single mothers and all that stuff. But there's a trail of breadcrumbs that leads right up to their door. MetLife Investment Management projects that institutional investors will control 40% of single-family rentals by 2030, or approximately 7.6 million homes. And this is, I guess, natural market evolution, when that nature is based on the idea of strategic capture and buying out other businesses. And it just so happens that owning assets, like owning homes, corporations are competing with people. They're competing with regular people, and with firms borrowing at 1.4%, while home buyers are paying mortgage interest rates between 6 and 7% as of the filming of this video. By default, a firm is able to offer that difference above what the average home buyer will be able to offer to just push them out of the market. Their money's way better. They run by an economy of scale, and the average person does not. In Miami, investors purchased 31% of all homes in 2024, which creates a self-reinforcing cycle where rising rents justify higher purchase prices, which then eventually will completely price out owner occupants until the end of time. Because why the would BlackRock ever have one of its investments sell one of their homes? They never would. Why would they? They don't need to. They don't need to move into another. They don't live in the house. They don't need the house. It's just money. They just need money is what they need. They don't want us to own anything. They don't want us to own anything. So this all sounds like a nightmare, but what's it like living in a corporate owned property? Maybe it's good. Maybe they put a lot of money, maybe they reinvest into the properties. I mean, we've seen in movies like Spider-Man, the landlord's kind of a dick, but his daughter's nice. His daughter's nice, and that's who Peter Parker should have been with. Let's be real. Maybe having a corporate overlord be the landlord is better. Maybe. I don't know. It's more like a Santa Claus thing. Like, is he even real? I don't know. Presents show up, though. Companies like Invitation Homes and American Homes for Rent, which are owned by Blackstone and BlackRock, respectively, have been the subject of intense scrutiny and controversy beyond just the fact that they're stealing homes from pregnant women. Being a tenant of these corporate landlords sounds like another nightmare and should be avoided entirely, if possible. In September 2024, the FTC filed action against Invitation Homes, which is a Blackstone-owned company, alleging that it had failed to keep promises made to tenants before their move-ins and is predatory to those who live in its properties. The 52-page complaint filed by the FTC outlines the promises made by Invitation Homes and their advertising campaigns, such as you get a worry-free leasing lifestyle in a home that's been inspected with access to 24/7 emergency maintenance, and security deposits will only be deducted from your damage beyond normal wear and tear, which that's all sounds very fair. But the truth of the matter is that Invitation Homes would hide junk fees in its rental listings, leading to actual monthly payments higher than advertised. Properties are frequently in poor shape with major habitability issues requiring immediate maintenance upon move-in. Some of the junk fees or hidden mandatory fees imposed by Invitation Homes include the following: utility management fees, air filter delivery, smart home technology fees, lease easy bundle, internet package fee. You're telling me you can't just pay the internet company? You have to also pay the person who owns the house to be able to connect to the internet? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Hey, guess what? Bombs in the mail. The CEO of Invitation Homes even reportedly called the senior vice president in 2019 to tell him to juice this hog, referring to making the smart home fee mandatory to all renters. These hidden fees generated more than $60 million for the company and cost renters up to an additional $1,700 annually, which absolutely adds up. Remember, 37% of people can't afford a $400 emergency expense. What if they didn't have to pay for smart home fees? Then they'd have $1,700 more a year to spend on things that, you know, affect their lives. Groceries, their children's education. This additional $1,700 is more than they expected to pay based on advertising and their agreements with Invitation Homes. Invitation Homes would also withhold security deposits for damage that was either pre-existing or fell into normal wear and tear. They would even encourage tenants not to seek government protections from evictions, which occurred at much higher rates than non-corporate landlords, allegedly as high as 65% of tenants. It's also pretty difficult if you're a regular ass person to get somebody evicted from your house. If they live in your house, you can't really just get rid of them. But if you're a corporation that owns a property, you are afforded rights that the average person is not afforded. Therefore, you can just get rid of people because you have $1 billion and you can afford it till the end of time. It's not backwards compatible though, of course, that whole privilege and right thing. Corporations have privileges and rights that the average person does not have, but corporations are seen as people. They are afforded the same rights as people, which is amazing. It's really awesome. I love that that's hey, at least they can't vote though. They don't have that right. Corporations, I mean. Just don't look up lobbying. One example from 2023 involved a couple in Los Angeles who were evicted from their home despite never missing a rent payment, seemingly because they had made complaints about water leaks and mushrooms growing out of the walls. Not even bullshitting you. Invitation Homes had told them that they needed to leave because the house was unsafe and required significant repairs, but it was still an active listing just weeks after the couple who had lived there for nearly a decade had left, and their experience is not unique. They're evil. Not these people, but these corporations. There were government protections from evictions that were in effect during the COVID-19 pandemic. The CARES Act mandated that landlords could not evict or initiate an eviction from March through August of 2020, and later, if you submitted a CDC declaration to your landlord in accordance with the CDC eviction moratorium, you were protected from eviction for nearly a year. But instead, Invitation Home encouraged their tenants to use their hardship affidavit, which promised to be a discussion between tenants affected by the pandemic and the corporate landlords, assuring renters that they were committed to working with those impacted. The word affidavit led renters to believe that they were legally protected, but this was not a substitute for the CDC declaration. And then Invitation Homes used the information it learned from those who filled out this form to make decisions about whether to evict renters who were then struggling. And when renters were upset after finding out they were being evicted and trying to protest, specifically citing government orders like the CDC eviction moratorium and the opt-in program, the hardship affidavit was not a substitute for it. And Invitation Homes obviously had a response. They said, "I'm so sorry. I know this is a difficult time. We're working within the government guidelines, and while many jurisdictions have temporarily paused evictions, they have indicated the rent due during this emergency declaration still needs to be paid. We want to work with you to pay your rent. How about you open up your mailbox and pull out that box?" There's so much harm being done to tenants of Invitation Homes properties that the FTC went after them, and Invitation Homes agreed to a settlement proposed by the FTC. By the way, settlement doesn't mean you're guilty, but surely for all of these predatory practices towards consumers and the juicing of the hog of junk fees, the fines imposed on the company would be a worthy slap on the wrist, right, guys? Despite charging over $60 million in hidden junk fees with an impact to consumers in the home rental marketplace beyond more than $60 million in hidden fees, the settlement the FTC proposed sought only $48 million, which would go into a consumer relief fund. So, not anywhere near how much they made off of juicing that hog. Also, behavior hasn't changed. Unnecessary charges and incompassionate interactions still occur regularly, with some even being uploaded to TikTok, such as one woman, Christina, showing Invitation Homes refusing to take her rent because she refused to pay for the landscaping that they did.
You are evicting me for not paying my rent, correct? I don't want my rent back. I am paying my rent on time.
So I will give these to you.
Nope, they're not mine. They are yours. You people are ridiculous.
Christina lived there for 2 years, and at the start of her rental, the yard had been overgrown and the landscaping rocks had been sparse, so she'd asked if they'd be willing to spruce it up, and even offered to pay for half if they brought in some bushes. They never responded, and then 60 days before her 2-year term was ending, they show up to do work and tacked on a $900 charge to her bill. She reached out to say that she didn't want to pay for it anymore because she was moving out very soon, and it doesn't make sense for this much time to have gone by, obviously. And so long as she refused to pay, they wouldn't take her rent. That is supervillain behavior. I'm gonna be real with you. You absolutely know. You cannot pretend that they didn't want to get the tenant that's about to leave to pay for the landscaping so the place could look nice, and then so they could hike the price up for the next renter because of the new work. I mean, that's absolutely what happened. Then on to American Homes for Rent, specifically about their landlord quality. They don't appear to be any better if you're looking for a landlord who's going to be understanding of your circumstances, even in the event of a natural disaster or public crisis. I visited their page on the Better Business Bureau. The very first thing that caught my attention was a complaint that left me speechless. On May 30th, 2024, a complaint was made to the Better Business Bureau about American Homes for Rent that said the following: received eviction notice during a national disaster declaration by the governor of Texas and the president of the United States. We were without food and power. We had to find other accommodations to stay for 5 days. No power, no anything. Could not work for 4 days due to power outages, and we are not asking to avoid payments, but to extend the residents' time. They are issuing evictions in a national disaster area. Now, there is no specific region that's mentioned, but catastrophic storms and flooding occurred in May 2024, prompting crippled governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, to issue disaster declarations and request that then President Joseph Biden escalate the situation to a presidential disaster declaration. So that's what we assume that's coming from. And according to the governor, 27 of the 98 affected Texas counties qualified for public assistance programs, which were partially approved by Joe Biden. And on June 5th, 2024, American Homes for Rent responded to the BBB complaint, stating that the matter had been referred to their local team on May 31st and that it had been resolved to the satisfaction of both the resident and the company. Just kidding. The same day, the renter replied, rejecting the all is good response, saying that American Homes for Rent had tacked on a $654 attorney fee for a payment that had already been made, and they even followed that up by alleging the fee was in place to prevent residents from making payments. And American Homes for Rent responded again, saying that the matter was resolved in accordance with local law and the lease agreement. They're unable to remove the legal fees or provide the desired resolution because it's not allowed. They're not allowed to do that. They can't do that. They can't do that. Why can't they do that? I could do that. I could just not charge at all. I own a business. I could just not charge people. I could decide to not do that. I could just not do that. We give people discounts all the time. If people buy something and don't like it, we give them a refund. You know why? Because we can decide to do that.
I am unable to satisfy you. I am unable. I can't satisfy myself or my wife, which leads me to be unable to satisfy you.
Boom! Ticonderoga number 2. Right to the heart. Now, obviously, the renter, because of the extra fee, felt as though the company was retaliating against them. Because it was! And had no basis for evicting them over a payment that was, in fact, made, and alleged that access to their account where they could view what they owed was taken down before the due date provided by the company, and the property manager stopped answering their calls. This exact same thing happened to me with an insurance company. Their website stopped working magically. Crazy how that works before you can make a payment. Insane. To collect late fees and float the money for longer. There is a massive conspiracy. I think I'm crazy. Press like if you're also crazy. Eventually, American Homes for Rent caved. Luckily, the last update is from June 27th, 2024, from that customer stating that the additional legal fees were removed. So much for them not being able to remove them, obviously, and the account was restored with no issues and the eviction was dropped. Oh, thank God, it only took a month. This is not the case for everyone, however. Only those who are publicly victims. Over the past 3 years, the company has received 754 complaints to the Better Business Bureau, and its customer review rating sits at an impressive 1.12 out of 5 stars. So, good job, heads. Reviews accuse them of doing nothing about mold and hazardous conditions that threaten both the renter's home and neighbors, as well as accusing them of scamming by waiting for hopeful renters' $100 applications to expire before returning calls. Those are just reviews from this month, August 2025. I reviewed all of their 2025 reviews, and out of 75 reviews since January 1st, 73 were 1-star and 2 were 2-star reviews. And now, welcome to the conspiracies. Okay, guys, Larry Fink. This video is about Larry Fink, just in case you forgot, okay? Now the king of the world, aka the World Economic Forum. You will own nothing and you will be happy. This is a trend that we're seeing all too frequently now. Not long ago, you'd go to a Best Buy or some kind of other store. You could buy a movie, an album, a video game. You could take it home. You could read the back. You used to be able to take a device home and own it. Nowadays, you can't do that. You subscribe to a streaming service that allows you to access movies and shows that you do not hold the rights to. They temporarily hold the rights to, and then to listen to music. You pay Spotify to access their catalog of music from artists, but you lose access when you stop paying. You pay for Xbox games, Game Pass, or PlayStation Plus subscriptions to access libraries of games for cheap until you stop paying. You pay the full price for a game that you technically don't even own and can lose access if Steam or the developer or the publisher decides to just take it away. It's unbelievable. NZXT, a PC company, had their controversy when Gamers Nexus exposed their predatory PC rental program. Ubisoft's director of subscriptions faced backlash for stating that the shift from owning to subscribing was a necessary one. Yeah, maybe necessary for getting this dick in your butt. While we're on the topic of subscriptions, even car manufacturers are beginning to paywall features behind subscriptions. You can buy a car at full price, but suddenly that's not enough and you need to pay monthly for hardware or software that it literally comes with. BMW blocked heated seats and steering wheels physically in the car behind a subscription fee. That's unbelievable. Tesla charged fees for extended battery range when it's already in the car. Mazda charged $120 a year for remote start. Volkswagen's electric vehicles are locking the full horsepower of their cars behind paywalls of $22 a month or a one-time payment of $880. Mercedes-Benz and Tesla both reduced acceleration rates for drivers who don't subscribe to their respective faster acceleration subscriptions. You will own nothing and you will be happy. That's what all this means. And it's a quote that is oftentimes attributed to Klaus Schwab, the second ugliest man in the world, who is also the founder and chairman of the World Economic Forum. But it's actually a simplified version of a thought experiment from Denmark Parliament member Ida Auken titled, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." Originally published in 2016, it paints a picture of the future one might see as either utopian or dystopian, depending on your own personal convictions, where every need and accommodation becomes free to access, and what is now considered a product has now become a service, so you don't actually need to own anything and you can just exist. This essay from Ida does have association with the World Economic Forum because it was published on the WEF website, has been deleted, but it's archived on the Wayback Machine, and it's, in my opinion, a genuine concern that you should be worried about. It's their goal. If we quickly look at what the WEF is, who's involved in the connection to the corporate-backed mass home buying, it's a gigantic red flag. The World Economic Forum technically has no formal authority over any country, government, or corporation. It's not a lawmaking body. It's a non-governmental, non-profit organization based in Geneva, Switzerland, with the following as their official mission statement.
We bring together government, business, and civil society to improve the state of the world.
Relative to what? Heads. Relative to what? That's the first thing you see when you go to the WEF website landing page. They try to tackle global challenges across multiple sectors, from energy to cybersecurity, from AI to climate, from healthcare to urban transportation, from my balls to my tip. Stakeholders come from public and private sectors. Now that sounds weird. Sounds bad maybe a little bit, but it's also could be okay. But there are legitimate concerns that exist about the WEF's influence, and Larry Fink, BlackRock CEO managing $10 trillion in assets, became the WEF interim co-chair in August 2025, this month. That old turtle's really getting good. He's really getting good at controlling stuff. Billionaires and leaders of the world's largest corporations, Amazon and Microsoft, meet annually with world leaders where they talk about economic strengths, trade, technology, and more. And even though it's not a lawmaking body, it does bring together the world's elite and does shape agendas and creates networks within which big ideas and deals can then be born. It's a club for the most rich and the most powerful, where it feels like ordinary people are not even remotely represented or even heard at all. If you're not making $1 billion a year for a Fortune 500 company, what the f are you bringing to the table? Nothing. You're little shriveled ball sack. So with the rise in advocacy and activism, companies can put on a front of being involved in popular ideology shifts, but this too is something that has financial incentives and muddies the water of genuine intention behind corporate activism. What exactly do I mean? ESG investing. It's an investment approach that prioritizes how companies score in environmental, social, and governance metrics. So how do companies safeguard the environment? How does it manage relationships with employees and communities? And how does a company treat leadership? In 2020, both the WEF and BlackRock were making pushes towards the ESG prioritization, with Larry Fink in his 2020 letter to CEOs focused on the reshaping of finance, emphasizing the dangers of climate change. The line, "climate risk is investment risk," is a big-time epic point. This same year, Klaus Schwab published his call for the Great Reset to the World Economic Forum, and in this Great Reset, Schwab calls for the creation of a new system that focuses on creating incentives for industries to improve their track record on ESG metrics. The Great Reset also promotes stakeholder capitalism, where unelected corporate stakeholders gain influence over public policy through multi-stakeholder partnerships. And conveniently, the year before, in 2019, Klaus Schwab, the second ugliest man in the entire world, published an opinion page to Project Syndicate all about stakeholder capitalism. He details how private corporations should be positioned as the trustees of society because that's clearly the best response to today's social and environmental challenges. What? Schwab specifically referenced an initiative being led by the chairman of the International Business Council and CEO of Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, as if Bank of America isn't considered one of the worst banks in the world according to customers, with a 1.13 out of 5 stars on Better Business Bureau. What a great company. 7,500 complaints in 3 years. Suck my dick, Bank of America.
Hey, you know us corporations who make billions? You trust us to have your best interest in heart, right?
No, actually. Can you trust corporations to stick to their guns and do the right thing after they advocate for it? No, of course you can't. Let's look to Larry Fink's BlackRock as an example of why you can't. It seems that they initially were striving to follow through on standing by the position Larry established in his 2020 letter to CEOs by backing 40% of shareholder proposed ESG investments, and BlackRock even joined a UN-sponsored climate coalition in March of 2021 by pledging to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. But by 2024, that ESG investment prioritization had fallen to 4%. Even the Wall Street Journal posted an article in March of this year titled, "BlackRock's Woke Era is Over," citing how the company had abandoned climate groups, including their net zero emissions pledge, as well as diversity targets. It's like, who gives a Whatever, however you can suck the government's dick, the incumbency's dick is what they do. For example, Mark Zuckerberg's based in red pilled now. I don't trust that freak. Whoever's on the side of the government is not who I'm on the side of, no matter what. Conveniently, Bank of America was also one of the big banks to abandon this climate group alongside BlackRock and other major banks. It's all performative nonsense to seem like these corporations care. They changed their shit to a rainbow in June, dude. The reversal in action from BlackRock stems from them facing a lawsuit alleging they violated antitrust laws by colluding with Vanguard, who also pledged to become net zero by 2050 to suppress coal output. And this lawsuit even had an endorsement from the FTC. It seems like the political and economic costs became too high for them to stand by their pledge, and just shows that making the pledge and advocating for ESG was more optics and influence than any kind of genuine belief, because companies and corporations cannot stand for anything, because regardless of how they're treated in the eyes of the law, they're not people. They're not people. It's a bunch of really evil people using this thing to make as much money as. But all that's beside the point. This is a hit piece on Larry Fink. And the thing is, some way, somehow, your money is finding its way into Larry Fink's pockets no matter what. BlackRock is one of the companies that has their hands in everything alongside Vanguard. If you manage to get into a home that isn't owned by a Wall Street landlord piglet, they're going to get you somewhere. Utility bills are numerous and expensive. Water bills, electricity bills, gas bills, sewage bills, heating and air conditioning, trash, and recycling. Any of those may be grouped together depending on where you might live, but for the most part, they're essentially a mandatory thing that everybody has to have, and they're unavoidable. And utilities over time are becoming increasingly targeted by investment firms like BlackRock, and prices continue to rise year after year. California's Pacific Gas and Electric Company demonstrates regulatory capture perfection, with rates increased nearly 3 times over 10 years, going from 13 cents per kilowatt hour in 2014 to 42 cents per kilowatt hour. Bills in general have just about doubled over the last 5 years, with an average home's use of 500 kilowatt hours per month rising from $100 to $200. And it isn't just inflation. Of course, money's worth less, but these are beyond inflation rates. There were 6 separate hikes approved in 2024 alone, while CEO Patricia Poppy's 2023 compensation reached $16.99 million plus $24.4 million in stock vesting. The salary increase alone is up almost $3 million from her $14.1 million the year prior. And of course, powerful people should be able to make money. They have so much power and influence, but like, you didn't invent that. You didn't make that. You didn't do shit. You bitch. I was so curious, I looked it up, and PCE is in fact a publicly traded company. And guess who owns 206 million shares valued at over $3 billion? Take a wild guess. Comment down below. The turtle owns it. Larry Fink. Turtle. So anyways, it's looking bleak. Is this the death of the American dream? It feels like we're getting closer and closer to that death every single year. 2008 housing market and economy collapse fueled a problem that is still going on. It was truly the penultimate event that is going to lead up to whatever we're about to experience. The man who helped pioneer the instrument of the economy's destruction profited greatly from that instrument and the destruction that it caused. And now that man heads the company that has its hands in almost every conceivable market, ensuring that no matter what you do or what you buy, he is going to make money off of you. So anyways, Press the like button if you guys want to see more content like this. Hit the subscribe button. Go to sour.gg, buy some sour candy made by real folks, and go to the Gump Club to watch the insane uncensored version of this video.